Most people fail this test before it even starts, not because they answer wrong, but because they try to answer safely. They overthink, they edit, they choose the version of themselves they want to be, instead of the version that shows up under pressure. So here's the deal. This isn't a test to prove you're healthy, confident, or emotionally evolved. It's a mirror, and the most important part isn't your final score. It's your first yes. That first yes is usually the moment your mind slips and tells the truth, before your defenses rush in to smooth it over. Because we don't avoid things that are meaningless. We avoid what carries emotional weight. A fear you don't want to name, a feeling you've learned to lock away, a need that once felt risky, a truth you've postponed. That's why this works. Your mind is incredibly smart. It learns what hurts, what overwhelms you, what costs you control, and it builds strategies to protect you. The problem is, those strategies don't always update. What once kept you safe can quietly start limiting your life, your relationships, your confidence, your ability to rest, your ability to be seen. In a moment, I'm going to ask you 7 yes or no questions. Your job is simple. Answer quickly. First instinct only. No pausing to justify, no turning it into a debate in your head. Just yes or no. And I want you to track 2 things. Which question was your first yes? How many total yes answers you got? That's it. Because after the questions, we're going to read your results in a way that's practical and honest. Your total yes count will show us how active these patterns are right now, how much stress or emotional load your system might be carrying. But your first yes will show us direction, the specific area where your mind tends to protect you automatically. One more important rule. If halfway through you feel the urge to change an answer, notice that urge and leave the original answer. That editing impulse is usually the defense system stepping in. And we're not here to fight your defenses, we're here to understand them. All right, take one breath, get something to note your answers, and when you're ready, we'll start with question 1, fast, simple, and honest. Before we jump in, let me remind you of the only rule that matters. Answer fast. Not because speed is magic, but because speed removes the mask. When you give yourself too much time, you don't just answer the question, you start negotiating with it. You look for exceptions. You try to sound better, you try to be the version of you that feels more acceptable. So for the next few minutes, don't do that. Give me your first instinct, yes or no. And as you go, keep track of 2 things, your first yes and your total number of yes answers. If you need to pause the video to write things down, do it. That's totally fine. All right, here we go. Question 1. Do you stay busy to avoid sitting with your thoughts? Just answer it yes or no. Question 2. Do you explain your feelings logically instead of actually feeling them? Yes or no. Question 3. Do you pull away when someone gets emotionally close? Yes or no. Question 4. Do you feel fine but kind of disconnected inside? Yes or no. Question 5. Do you avoid asking for help even when you need it? Yes or no. Question 6. Do you replay conversations in your head after they happen? Yes or no. Question 7. Do you feel uneasy when you're not in control? Yes or no. Now stop for a second. Don't rush past this part. Look at what you wrote down. Which question was your first yes? And how many yes answers did you get total? Here's the part where most people mess it up. They see an answer they don't like and immediately try to soften it. They tell themselves, well, sometimes, but not really. Or, that only happens when I'm stressed. And maybe that's true, but if it showed up as your first instinct, it still matters. Because it means your mind went there instantly. It's a pattern your system recognizes. So keep your answers exactly as they are. No shame, no judgment. This isn't a personality verdict, it's information, useful information. And now, before we interpret anything, I want you to do one thing. Drop your results in the comments. Write it like this. First yes, Jean, total yes, D's, for example. First yes, 3, total yes, 4. I'm serious. Do it now while it's fresh, before your mind talks you out of it. Because in the next chapter, I'm going to show you how to read these results in a way that actually makes sense. And your first yes is going to become the key. All right, now we interpret this in a way that's actually useful, not dramatic. You're holding two pieces of information, and each one tells a different story. First is intensity, your total number of yes answers. This doesn't label who you are. It reflects what your system may be dealing with right now. If you got 0 to 2, yes, it usually means one of two things. Either you're relatively regulated lately, or you're not strongly identifying with these patterns at the moment. That's a good sign. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It just suggests your defenses aren't running the show today. If you got 3 to 4, yes, you're in the middle zone. This is where many people live. Functional, capable, doing what needs to be done, but carrying tension in the background. It can show up as mental noise, guardedness, irritability, or a constant sense that you need to stay on top of things. If you got 5 to 7, yes, it often means your protective system is working overtime. Not because you're broken, because you've been under pressure for too long. When that happens, the mind doubles down on what it knows. Control, overthinking, staying busy, shutting down feelings, pulling away, pushing through. It's survival logic. Now the second piece of information is more important. Direction, which is your first yes. That first yes is usually the earliest point where your defenses activate automatically. It's the trigger zone. The place where your mind says, nope, too risky, too exposed, too uncertain, too emotional, too unpredictable. And it doesn't say it in words, it says it in patterns. Here's the simplest way to understand avoidance. You rarely avoid something because you're lazy or weak. You avoid something because at some point it had a cost. Maybe you felt judged when you opened up. Maybe you were punished for emotions. Maybe needing help led to disappointment. Maybe chaos taught you that control equals safety, so your mind adapted. It built a strategy and it became a habit. That's why your first yes matters. It points to the strategy you reach for without thinking. As we move into the next chapters, I want you to listen for one specific feeling: recognition. Not wow, that's intense, but yeah, that's me. The most accurate insight is often the quiet one that makes you pause. So keep two things in mind. Your total score shows how active these patterns are, but your first yes shows where the story begins. And with that, we're going to start decoding what it means if your first yes was question 1 or question 2, the patterns of constant motion and emotional overthinking. If your first yes was question 1, staying busy to avoid sitting with your thoughts, then what you may be avoiding isn't work. It's stillness, because stillness creates space. And space has a way of bringing things up. Emotions you didn't process, decisions you've postponed, grief you keep outrunning, anger you've turned into productivity, loneliness you don't want to name. So your mind chooses motion. It keeps you active, useful, occupied, because as long as you're moving, you don't have to feel what's waiting underneath. This can look like ambition from the outside. And sometimes it is. But inside, it often feels like you can't fully relax. Even when you have free time, your brain searches for something to fix, plan, or optimize. Silence feels uncomfortable, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system learned that quiet is when the hard stuff catches up. If that's you, the shift isn't to suddenly become a calm monk. The shift is smaller, learning that you can sit with your mind without being swallowed by it. A few minutes of quiet at a time. Tiny doses of stillness that teach your system, I can handle what I feel. Now, if your first yes was question 2, explaining your feelings logically instead of actually feeling them, your mind might be using a very common defense: intellectualization. This is the pattern where you can describe what happened, analyze why it happened, and even give yourself great advice. But you struggle to feel the emotion in real time. You turn feelings into thoughts because thoughts feel controllable. Feelings don't. A lot of people learned this early. Maybe emotions were ignored, maybe they were punished, maybe they caused conflict, so you became reasonable. You became the person who stays composed, and that helped you survive, so your mind kept doing it. The cost is subtle but heavy. You can understand your life but feel distant from it. You might say, I know what I should do, yet nothing changes, because insight without emotional processing rarely rewires the nervous system. Here's the turning point for both patterns. Your mind isn't your enemy. It's protecting you. but protection can become a prison when it never turns off. Quick mid-video CTA. If this is hitting home, take a second to like the video and subscribe. I'm making more psychology-based tests like this, simple on the surface, but actually meaningful underneath. Now let's move forward, because next we'll decode what it means if your first yes was question 3 or question 4. The patterns of distance, numbness, and emotional shutdown. If your first yes was question 3, pulling away when someone gets emotionally close, then what you may be avoiding isn't love. It's exposure. For a lot of people, closeness doesn't feel like comfort at first. It feels like risk. Risk of being misunderstood, risk of losing freedom, risk of being criticized, controlled, rejected, or abandoned. So when someone starts getting too close, emotionally, not just physically, your system steps in and creates distance. Sometimes it's subtle. You reply slower, you get busy, you keep conversations light, you stop sharing, you act colder than you feel. Other times it's more direct. You convince yourself the relationship isn't right. You focus on flaws, you pull back before they can. And here's what makes this tricky. You can truly want connection and still feel unsafe inside it. That doesn't make you broken. It means your nervous system learned a lesson. Closeness costs something. So your mind protects you by staying one step away. The goal isn't to force yourself into intimacy. The goal is to notice the moment the alarm goes off. When you feel the urge to disappear, ask yourself one honest question. What am I afraid will happen if I stay present right now? That question alone starts turning avoidance into awareness. Now, if your first yes was question 4, feeling fine but kind of disconnected inside, this often points to emotional numbness or a low-level shutdown response. People assume numbness means nothing is wrong. But more often, numbness means something is there, something heavy, and your system turned the volume down to keep you functioning. It's not weakness. It's a survival tool. This can show up as living on autopilot. You do what needs to be done. You smile, you perform, you keep going. But inside, things feel muted. Not terrible, just distant. You may even miss the ability to feel excited, inspired, or deeply moved because your mind has learned that intensity, good or bad, can be dangerous. And sometimes disconnection isn't about lack of emotion. It's about living too much in your head, planning, worrying, replaying, anticipating. When your mind is always ahead of you, your body stays behind. Presence becomes rare. So the first step here isn't to fix yourself, it's to gently reconnect. One small daily practice where you do one thing slowly, without multitasking, so your system learns that being present is safe again. Because whether your pattern is distance, -3, or numbness, -4, the message is similar. Your mind is trying to protect you from something that once felt too much. And that leads perfectly into the final set of first yes answers, to 5, Merca 6, and thus 7, where the protection looks like independence, overthinking, and control. Let's break those down next. If your first yes was question 5, avoiding asking for help even when you need it, then what you may be avoiding is reliance. Not because you don't like people, but because needing people can feel unsafe. Maybe you learned that help comes with strings attached. Maybe you were dismissed when you asked. Maybe you felt like a burden. Or maybe you had to grow up fast and became the one who handles everything. Over time, I'll do it myself stops being a preference and becomes an identity. And from the outside, it looks like strength. But the hidden cost is isolation. You carry too much alone and you don't notice how heavy it is until your system starts showing it through burnout, irritability, shutdown, or emotional distance. Real strength isn't never needing support. It's knowing how to choose safe support without losing yourself. Now, if your first yes was question 6, replaying conversations after they happen, then what you may be avoiding is uncertainty. Rumination is your brain trying to reduce social risk. It believes that if you replay enough, you can prevent embarrassment, rejection, or regret. But here's the trap. Replay doesn't create safety. It creates anxiety. The more you analyze the past, the more your mind teaches itself that the world is dangerous and you must be flawless. A healthier shift is to turn replay into a lesson, one clean sentence, then close the loop. What did I learn? And what will I do differently next time? Anything beyond that is usually self-punishment, disguised as thinking. And if your first yes was question 7, feeling uneasy when you're not in control, then what you may be avoiding is unpredictability. Control once made you feel safe. Maybe your life felt chaotic. Maybe mistakes were punished. Maybe being unprepared had consequences. So your mind learned to manage everything. Outcomes, emotions, people, even your own needs. The problem is control is exhausting. It keeps your body tense, your mind alert, and your peace conditional. I'll relax when everything is handled. But life never stops moving. So peace keeps getting delayed. Here's your micro step for today. Small, specific, and realistic. If your first yes was number 5, ask for one small piece of help, clearly defined. If it was number 6, write one sentence. Next time I will dabansis, then stop replaying. If it was number 7, do one tiny thing imperfectly on purpose and let it be okay. And finally, if you haven't yet, comment your results in one line. First, yes. Total, yes. Please. I read these and they help me decide what test to make next. Because the point isn't to judge yourself. The point is to notice what your mind protects you from, so you can stop living on autopilot and start living with choice.